The face of King Frissel smiles at you. For some reason, the smile now strikes you as more forced than it did before. Comrade, as you know, this journal takes its name from Mazov's immortal expression, du cristal à la fumée. This was his way of describing the way the rigid, crystalline structures of capitalist ideology turned to smoke under communism. But, like the structures of capitalist ideology, we too are at risk of going à la fumée, unlike many publications which are content to spoon-feed their readers reassuring drivel. La Fumée is committed to telling the radical truth, even when that truth may drive away potential subscribers. Only 4 issues in, and it sounds like they've already alienated their readership. Perhaps they've overestimated the market demand for this kind of commentary. So please, if you value our radical Mazovian perspective on contemporary politics, culture, and international affairs, please consider subscribing today.
What do you expect? It was laying around the office of the Debarders Union. They're probably bankrolling the thing.
You flip back to the front of the magazine. The table of contents unfolds before you. This section includes a long, tedious critique of the latest round of free trade negotiations between the EPIS nations and the Free State of Semenine. You also skip over an article about heavy fuel oil smuggling along the Messina border, something about bear wrestling in Samara, book riots in Yugograd. Whoa. Bear wrestling. Flip back to that. It seems to be part of a new public fitness initiative in the People's Republic of Samara, SRV, devised and promoted by none other than President Kanajinsky himself. According to this extremely credulous account, Uncle Sport, as he's affectionately known to his people, has recently decreed bear wrestling the national sport of the SRV. Based on the description in this article, he appears to be an extremely competent and democratically elected president. Sapormat Sport Kanajinsky is well into his 3rd decade as president of the SRV. Outside Samara, he's known for 3 things: brutal repression of internal dissent, monumental corruption, and a near pathological obsession with physical fitness. It's quite straightforward. A standard match features 1 man, or in some cases woman, against 1 bear. 2 competitors, 1 ring, 5 rounds, or until incapacitation. According to the SRV's Ministry of Information, the program has been a tremendous success. Public support stands at 87%, and youth obesity and alcoholism rates are down 12% and 7% respectively. This is the SRV we're talking about. If you think those are the real numbers, there's probably a guy who wants to sell you a bridge in La Chette. That's very much the idea. President Kanajinsky has long maintained that a strong body is the best defense against capitalist aggression. In shape, out of shape, you've always preferred to rely on your wits.
The Samaran People's Republic? No, I should expect not. Why do you ask? They are quite the spectacle, as I understand. I've heard they make the people in the front rows wear plastic sheets. On account of the blood, you see.
You flip back to the front of the magazine. The table of contents unfolds before you. It takes a moment, but gradually it dawns on you that Kunst und Kultur must mean arts and culture. Why they decided to title this one section in Volda is beyond you. Obviously because it's cool to drop random phrases in foreign languages. It evokes a sense of recognition and fellowship among those privileged enough to understand. As you leaf through this section, you come across several reviews of recent radio plays, as well as a brief artist spotlight featuring a local artist identified only as CS. The main feature, though, is a long essay titled Tip Top Tournée, a critical Mazovian perspective. This so-called artist spotlight is really just a brief Q&A, made all the briefer by the subject's evident hostility to her interviewer. That certainly sounds like a certain delinquent youth who likes to harass you from her balcony. You think you're settling in for a relaxing recap of the most recent season, maybe sprinkled with some nice anecdotes about a few of the more colorful drivers. Instead, you find yourself skimming a 10,000-word feature about all the politically problematic aspects of Tip Top Tournée. Where to even start? For one, there's the crass commercialism of its sponsorships, and then there's the practically criminal emphasis on deadly motor crashes. So, all of it, basically. Oddly enough, this article has 2 bylines: Nasteb Encolada Bernal and Exilus Buka. There's no way those are real names. Have you ever met anyone named Exilus? Come on, they're plainly pseudonyms. More than that, they're likely anagrams. Under capitalism, the article says, every pursuit has its price. Every pleasure, even one as elemental as the joy of racing others around a track, is reduced to an advertising opportunity. Thus, the so-called tournée becomes a competition between increasingly meaningless brand signifiers. Your discount laundry detergent racing against a pack of Astra cigarettes, or even a fritter. And that precisely is what's problematic about it. Were it not for the promise of random, spectacular violence, audiences would quickly lose interest. At the end of the day, it's the destruction of these 750,000 real races that you're really watching for. Sure, you think that, but subconsciously, it's the visions of brand names being engulfed in flames that you crave. This flimsy magazine is right. Deep down, you know the only true stakes are life and glory, or death by fiery dismemberment. That's because you haven't been reading critically. But don't worry. The whole point of these sorts of articles is to let someone else read critically for you.
I can safely say the thought had never crossed my mind, Detective. I'm sure most things are, if the young men who wrote this article are to be believed. If I had to wager, I'd say they've never even seen the inside of a motor, much less a motor race. I take whatever they write with a large grain of salt.
You flip back to the front of the magazine. The table of contents unfolds before you. Unsurprisingly, much of this section is taken up with articles declaring unqualified support for the dockworkers' strike. You skim the headlines. Paint the harbor red and white. Martinaise tames the wild pines. A city in revolt. First we take Martinaise, then we take La Delta. Finally, there's a brief article by the writer, G. Martin, accusing the owner of the Capeside apartments of illegally attempting to evict certain communist tenants simply for not having paid their rent. One of the editorials proclaims that the more the forces of reaction attempt to crush the body, the more defiant the spirit of communism becomes. Sounds like their bodies just haven't been crushed enough yet. You flip back to the front of the magazine. The table of contents unfolds before you. Unsurprised, you skim the... Finally, there's a brief article by... According to these editorials, private enterprise is simply a means of organizing labor that would already happen regardless. Absolute nonsense. Whoever wrote this has clearly never built a successful business before. It goes on to call the wild pines a nightmarish transnational leech sucking the life from the laboring classes of Martinaise. You flip back to the front, unsurprised. You skim. Finally, there's a brief... The writer G. Martin remarks dryly that capitalists love wealth redistribution, so long as it's only redistributed upward. Good thing your rent-paying days are behind you. You flip back to the front of the unsurprised. You skip. Finally, there's a brief article by according to these editorials, there can be no accommodation with the forces of international capital or their mucilaginous allies in the coalition. Why do communists love puerile insults? And they wonder why they're always being left out in the cold. You flip back to the front. Finally, there's a brief article by the eternal problem, according to G. Martin, is that under capitalism, the worker is rendered incapable of perceiving their own agency or lack thereof. Thus, they tend to experience their own oppression as though it were happening to somebody else. Is that true? Have you felt estranged from your own self recently? You flip back to the front of the magazine. The table of contents unfolds before you. What's this? We're getting reports of normal, reasonable, temperate political opinions somewhere in Martinaise.